Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to our Visioning Empathy Circle. This is a discussion to talk about our vision for the property in 1964 Canoas Road in Santa Barbara. Charles, my brother, just purchased the property, and we're looking at how to develop it and build a retreat center there. And as you saw, we had our mission statement too, that I'm Edwin Rutsch, the director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And for about 15 years, I've been working on the topic of, on the project to just increase the level of empathy in society and the world. And now Charles has purchased this property and asked that I help manage it, and with our to create a nonprofit, based on our empathy center to manage the property. So we're going to be using the empathy circle practice, which is the beginning of this discussion, which is sort of the best first step gateway practice that I know of for fostering empathy and kind of mutual understanding. It's based on active listening. I hope I'll explain a little bit later, like what the process is. But first, let's go around and maybe just introduce ourselves, your name, your location, why you're interested in taking part in this discussion. And I'll just model it. Oh, Vasilisa, great. Yay. Hey, Vasilisa. That's Charles's wife. So we're just going to do introductions. Like I said, I'm Edwin Rutsch. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, El Cerrito, just north of Berkeley. And Charles had asked me to, help manage this property. So that's what my interest is. So Sean, would you like to go next?
Oh, gosh, sure. Hi, Sean Mitchell. I've more or less met several of you and Juliet and other beloved friends. So, I've been in the retreat center business. I was with La Casa de Maria for almost 10 years. And I'm excited and thrilled and excited and thrilled, and find the whole idea of having a new retreat center in Santa Barbara, so meaningful and touches me to my core. So I'm happy to contribute and participate and assist in any way I can.
Well, thanks for joining us, Sean. Charles, would you like to go next?
My name is Charles Rutsch. Edwin Rutsch is my brother. I purchased the property couple of months ago. This is my wife, Vasilisa. We're currently in Tahoe at an Airbnb. We'll be checking out in a little under an hour, then being on the road. So, okay, that's all.
Yeah, Vasilisa, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Vasilisa. I'm Charles's wife and Edwin's sister-in-law. Excited about the retreat center that they're working on. We're actually going to go there this week, take a look at some things and work on some things.
Right. Kent?
I think I know most of you. Lisa, I was joking before you came on. I have a lot of experience with young people from about 7 to 14, and I can see why you're up in Tahoe sometimes. So welcome to an exciting ride. Anyhow, my name is Ken Ferguson. I'm up in the Zuni Mountains of New Mexico, but I had 35 happy years in Santa Barbara, where I was involved with all number of nonprofit educational things. Maybe some of you know of the Institute of World Culture on Chapala Street, or the Vard Santa Foundation on Anacapa or Anacapa High School. But mostly my focus in Santa Barbara was the Santa Barbara Middle School, where I helped start it and was the head of that for 20 years. And I'll just mention to Sean and Juliet that I started school in New Zealand, and among my major backers were Don George and his wife, Dawn, from Casa de Maria, and Steve Eisenstadt and I go back many decades, about 40. And he helped me. He actually visited and sent his children to both my schools. So fascinating what a small world it is.
Yeah, small world. Yeah, thanks. Juliet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. Well, that's interesting to hear about, Ken. Nice to meet you. Yes, I'm currently chairing a program at Pacifica that is one of the depth psychology specializations. This one is depth psychology, integrative therapy, and healing practices. I was a big fan of La Casa de Maria. I facilitated a couple of retreats there and attended things there. I think it would be wonderful for Santa Barbara to have another retreat center, to have a special place like that where people could go and have a variety of experiences. I've also been involved in Ed Bastian's group, the interspiritual work and his Spiritual Paths Foundation. So let's see, that's about it for now.
Okay, thank you. Heather, just introduction.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, you're muted. You just went mute.
There you go. Hi. Lovely being here. Thank you. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. Sean invited me and talked about the center, and I was very excited. I've been in the center retreat field my entire life. It's a family business in the health and spiritual realm, as well as facilities. I recently ran a large facility and spiritual center in New York. As way of background, I'm also an ordained reverend, interfaith minister, and I just got my doctorate from Meridian in organization. So I have a background in organizational leadership as well. So sort of pulling together many things. I'm really fascinated by what you're doing. So thank you.
Great. So we're going to start off with, I guess Charles and Vasilisa may have to leave a little bit early since they're going to be checking out, but we're going to use the empathy circle process. I think most people here are familiar with it. Hopefully, Heather and Juliet, you were able to see how it works. And I know Juliet is, being in the therapy world, it's basically active listening in a group setting. One person is a speaker. They select their listener. You speak for 4 minutes, and I'll keep time. And if your time comes up, I might hold up a sign, just time, kind of wrap up what you're saying, get your final reflection. And then the listener becomes the speaker, selects who they're going to speak to, and we just go around for the time allotted. And so I think we're ready to start. I can be the first listener, whoever would like to speak, and our topic is, what is your vision for an empathy-based retreat center at 1964 Las Canoas Road in Santa Barbara? So who would like to speak? I'm listening.
I guess I can.
Okay.
I tend to like to go first and not be anticipating. When I think of a retreat center, these days I'm really interested in attending to diversity, equity, inclusion, world traditions, where nobody really is left out regarding what their particular tradition might be or what might be opening up for them in blending traditions and even opening into new ways of understanding spirituality.
So I'll reflect that what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing when you're thinking about a retreat center, you're thinking of diversity, equity, inclusion. So a sense of diversity and a sense of including of maybe all different people and cultures. And
yeah, and I also I wondered if restorative justice processes could be part of an out branch of a retreat center. And then I was reflecting even a clinic, a psychotherapy clinic that included spiritual questions, spiritual explorations. I don't know, that's big thinking, but just some thoughts that percolated as seeds. I think defining empathy and what that means in a broader sense for a retreat center, for groups of people coming together with a shared mission. And also, I just want to say I'm grateful to Sean for inviting me into this circle.
Okay, I'm hearing some gratitude towards Sean for inviting you. In terms of empathy, you're wanting maybe a broader, a definition for it. What does that mean? And then seeing that perhaps there would be a space for sort of psychological practices and restorative justice as well, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm new to this. I'm new to this circle. I'm new to whatever the intentions might already be for this retreat center. But it's really all I can come up with right now. And aside from really, it's nice to meet everybody and connect in this way and hear about synchronicities and, small worlds. And that's really for me now.
Okay, then I hear you're sort of seeing the synchronicity, sort of appreciation for that. And so, yeah, then I'll speak and I'll select Charles.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. I just put the link in here. If you want to anyone wants to take notes, they can take notes on that document. In terms of the center, I've been working for about 15 years on the topic of empathy. How do we create a more empathic society? So I've done a lot of work with definitions. You just kind of, with.
So you've been working almost 15 years on your Center for Empathy. So you've done a lot of work with, did you say definitions?
Definitions of empathy, yeah.
Definitions of empathy.
And in terms of, Juliet's ideas about restorative justice, I really see that the center could have a center for restorative practices, for conflict mediation. We've done a lot with political left-right mediation. We've been out where the political left and right are having demonstrations, like knockdown, drag out fights, like out on the streets, LA, Berkeley. And we go there with our empathy tent and offer listening to both sides and do conflict mediation.
So as Juliet says, you could totally see that retreat center could participate in restorative justice or reconciliation. You've had a long history of mediating between the left and the right and taking your empathy tent to hotspots where there's been a lot of conflict.
Yeah, as well as in families too. So we've done family mediation, bring families together. This practice that we're doing now is sort of the core practice for any kind of a mediation. If there's a conflict, you can get the parties listening to each other. What we're doing right now is the practice that I think is the foundational practice for any sort of conflict mediation work. And we've done it with, like I said, with families as well.
So you've done this with families as well, and this practice of reflective listening is the kind of the core practice.
And I'm really excited Juliet's here from the Pacific Institute, because I think there's a really great synergy, I think, between what we're doing here, based on empathy. Empathy is like the core of any sort of psychological or any kind of counseling therapy work. It's like the core essence, it seems to me. So I think there's a lot of overlap with Juliet's school there.
So you're happy that Juliet is here from the Pacific Institute because you believe there's a lot of synergy and overlap between what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thanks, Charles. Want to select your listener?
Okay, I'll speak to my wife. Okay, when I bought the place a couple months ago, I was thinking, well, the price was right, and I could maybe have different retreats, everything from marriage retreats to men's retreats, women's retreats, that kind of thing.
So when you bought the retreat about 2 months ago, you thought that the price was right and that you could do different retreats at the place, variety, like men's retreats and marriage retreats and women's retreats.
Right. So there's a lot of potential for other retreats. I don't know how much of the time Edwin's work will occupy this space, but there is potential for other things too.
Yeah, so there is a variety of retreats that could take place at the space, and I don't know how much, you don't know how much time Edwin's work will take place at the center, but there's definitely room for different kind of things there.
Okay, happy Lord, choose your speaker, listener.
I was supposed to be kind of a fly on the wall here.
Here's their names.
Yeah. I don't know. May I skip my turn?
If you just select someone, just say a few words, maybe Sean or Heather or Kent.
I'll speak to you, Edwin.
Okay, I'm listening.
I'm hoping that one of the things that, we will do is, you know what, I'm really going blank. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just going blank. You're kind of starting to think of something, but then kind of going blank and.
Sorry.
You just say you're feeling heard, and then we can move on. Or okay, you're feeling heard. Great.
I didn't expect Charles to choose me.
Okay, yeah, you're kind of surprised that you were chosen. You wanted to be a fly on the wall, and just kind of went blank. So, okay, and you feel heard. It'll come around again if you have ideas. So I'll speak to Sean then. Yeah, so in terms of the type of workshop, it's very open. I have some workshops for empathy work that we do, but it's very open. It can be restorative practices, it can be yoga, it can be dance, where it could be you name it. The floor is pretty open in terms of the activities that we can hold there. So it's not just one type of practice.
What I'm hearing you say, Edwin, is that you feel that there's a lot of opportunity for lots of different kinds of programs and retreats and initiatives and learning opportunities.
Yeah, so if anyone has an idea of some kind of a workshop, for example, I heard Juliet say she'd held workshops there where you had worked, and just put together some ideas. I had lived a year at Esalen, and so I'm familiar with Esalen. Just all kinds of different. Any person can kind of hold a workshop there if they have an audience, can bring in attendees. So.
What I'm hearing you say is similarly very open to hearing about all kinds of opportunities for individuals to do workshops, seminars, and retreats. Perhaps, because Juliet did some at La Casa, she would have some thoughts and ideas about the different kinds that Las Canoas could hold.
Exactly. And so currently there's 14 bedrooms that are usable. They need to be furnished. And there's several sort of meeting rooms. So little things can already get started pretty soon for once we get furnishings. And there's a lot of renovation still to do of other buildings. But yeah, it could already, small workshops could already be held pretty soon.
You're saying that pretty soon there's an opportunity to start having some workshops and retreats. There's 14 sleeping bedrooms that will be available. You're renovating them, and you think you could get started pretty soon.
Yeah, those are already renovated. They just need furnishings, and there's a whole another wing that needs major renovation. That's more, towards a year sort of a project to renovate those with permits and, getting plans. And so, yeah.
So those 14 rooms that you were talking about, they're ready to go. They've been renovated, but they need furniture. And then there's another building or section of some rooms that still need to be renovated, and they might be hopefully ready by the end of the year.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you, Sean.
Okay. Thanks, Edwin. Yeah, I'll call on Heather.
Hello, I'm listening.
Well, I read a little bit about what Edwin sent out. Sorry, I was a little late on the, please submit 3 questions, but I did read Kent's 3 comments, questions.
So I'm hearing that you reviewed the material, the comprehensive material that was set out, and even though you didn't write 3, you did read Kent's.
Yeah, and I tend to, I guess at this point, kind of agree with Kent that, I'm feeling more like, curious about structure and operations and, the checklist of getting towards when it's going to be ready to come on the market, so to speak.
I'm hearing your enthusiasm about when it's ready to go on the market, and like kind of more the specifics and the checklists around what's happening, what's currently being done, because I'm sensing from you that there's a lot of work that's already available.
I also would say that I feel, and this kind of reflects back to what Edwin and Juliet was saying too, is that I feel personally quite confident that there's going to be a lot of individuals, organizations, and small groups, and so on, that are going to be very excited and delighted to potentially have workshops and seminars and retreats there. In fact, I also feel that along the lines of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy and what Juliet said earlier about an initiative for, it could be let me leave it at that and I'll follow up in a sec.
Yeah. I'm hearing that, like others, you're feeling that really is a place that people will want to come for a variety of different types of programs, and that there's really a space from very exciting, meaningful programming. It's already being planned.
I also feel as a retreat center that, there's other organizations that align with Edwin's mission that don't have what I'm going to call a brick and mortar property to maybe call home, even if they're not there, all the time. And there might be an opportunity to have other organizations have a bit of a home base, if you will, there. And I think that could be very successful.
Yeah. Feeling that there are other organizations that don't have the brick and mortar or the facilities that could really find a meaningful home base there to contribute to.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. I feel heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And how about Kent? Would you be my...
Happy to be that, Heather.
Thank you. And I'm really enjoying being here and listening to some of the programming I've heard of Retreat Center, and I'm beginning to hear more about categories, if you will, of potentially body or physical, like yoga retreats, mind, which are more the organizational as well as spirit, and just interested in the fullness of the programming.
I'm hearing that Heather is happy to be here, rather excited. She's drawn to the organizational side of things, and feels that the word used was fullness, that there's quite a lot of possibilities here.
I'm also happy to be here. I looked at some of the previous recordings, and I know there's a lot being done in terms of the facilities and the thinking around the process. And I'm also hearing a lot around the term, and I'll use it, safety, particularly safety of culture, safety of ideas. And I'm also curious about an overall safety plan, because I know you were talking about, you know, some of the refurbishing and what needs to be done, but the full essence of being a safe place for people to come in terms of just, you know, weather and ways of being. So just to be a safe place and everything that would incorporate, because that feels like a very safe place for ideas, people, and just for families to be.
So you're speaking about the fact that you are so interested that you've already seen some previous presentations, previous programs. You're focused right now on the concept of safety, and not so much safety, physical safety, but safety for ideas, where people feel safe to express, to listen, to try out something. And you have a marked curiosity about all of this, and looking forward to more.
Thank you, Kent. I feel heard.
Well, thank you, Heather. Like all of you, I'm very happy to be here.
Who are you speaking to? Select your listener.
Oh, sorry. Well, let me go back to Juliet, if that's all right. Juliet, are you okay with that?
Absolutely. I'm listening.
Well, thank you. I'm just thrilled that Heather and Juliet and Sean are here. This is probably my fifth or sixth circle. I've been following this with much enthusiasm for a couple of months now. I must say that, Juliet, when you mentioned synchronicities and overlaps, I very much resonate to that. I actually, my own personal belief is something wants to be born, something rather beautiful. I don't know what. I feel like if I have the privilege of being a midwife in a way, I'll get the towels and hot water and see what happens. I might mention that about all this overlap business, that I just got off the phone with my friend and brother of many decades, Roger Himovitz. And Roger has just purchased the Dos Pueblos Institute. And for those of you that are in Santa Barbara, that is another interesting connection going on here.
Remember to pause for your reflection.
Sorry, Edwin. Yes, sorry.
So Kent, I'm hearing you say that you were pleased to see several of us here, that in this overviewing of things, you're appreciating the synchronicities. It's a lot for me to remember here.
Yes.
You're also intrigued by what the connection can be with the Dos Pueblos. It's a facility, and that there may be some connections there.
Well done. And I'll try to remember to pause. I would like to mention that years ago, we helped form something called the Santa Barbara Summit for Tibet. And in that phase, we looked carefully at this property, then called St. Mary's. And in fact, we had a plan where the Dalai Lama of Tibet was going to helicopter onto the property on his 80th birthday, which was 6 years ago now. And that, therefore, I became familiar with the place. I'll pause.
So I'm hearing you say that when the center was St. Mary's, you were involved with the Tibetan group coming through that really wanted to bring the Dalai Lama to have his 80th birthday there. And that you're reflecting on that right now with some fond memories.
Yes, and thank you. And it wasn't only Tibet, but that was the first thing. It was indigenous cultures from all over the world. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, when I found out that Charles had purchased it, my first thought was, well, it's a place that had a vision, a Roman Catholic seminary, but now it needs a new vision. Mm-hmm. And when I did, as Heather said, she did her homework and looked at stuff, I did too. And then I encountered Edwin, and I thought, well, here's a vision in search of a place.
So I'm hearing you say that the place had a vision, but now it needs a new vision. So you were pleased to see that Heather was looking into things beforehand, just as you were, and really pleasantly surprised to also have Edwin here.
And that was the time, 4 minutes, so.
Thank you, I feel heard.
Thank you.
Okay, you just continue, Juliet, select your listener.
Ah, okay. Sean. I'm appreciating hearing everybody's reflections, and wish that I had a chance to look more at the materials ahead of time. I got the link and I assumed it was just the link. You know, I got the email. I've been very busy. So only about 5-10 minutes before this call was I able to see, oh my goodness, there are so many pieces there I could have looked at ahead of time.
So what I'm hearing you say, Juliet, is that you're grateful to be here and that you didn't have an opportunity, you're quite busy, to take a look at all the, I guess you could say, linked materials before the call, but looks like there's a lot of information there.
So I'm getting a sense of things by listening to everyone, and I'm getting a feeling of anticipation and excitement for what this could be. I know that property has been up there for a while, and I actually know a couple of people who've been to retreats up there, Buddhist meditation retreats, when I don't know who led them, but it's a wonderful property, and I think there's a lot of possibility for it.
So I hear you saying that you're hearing what everyone here on the call is sharing, and that you're familiar with the property, and that you know that there have been some retreats up there in the past, and you feel that it has a lot of opportunity.
And I feel heard. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'll ask Edwin. Mm-hmm. This might be a little bit on the maybe a little more on the operational kinds of, maybe a couple of questions to you.
Mm-hmm. So you want to ask some questions that are more operational type questions?
Yeah, one of my first questions has got to do with not just the conditional use permit, but if you perhaps have had an opportunity to look for maybe a land use attorney that could help with some of those things.
And it's your
local land use attorney.
Yeah, so you're thinking of if we had a local land use attorney that could address the conditional use permit.
Yes, you know, and probably they would be able to facilitate some facilitate some of the issues that you'll be needing to work through.
Yeah, I think it's like you're seeing the conditional use permit sets the stage for how the property is used, and going to need, maybe you're suggesting a attorney, land use attorney, to kind of help work through the use based on the conditional use permit.
And I do feel that, there'll be other, quote, land use issues that may come up that they could help you with.
And an attorney would help with all those land use issues that will probably come up.
And then another question is, or something that I would suggest putting on your endless list, is if you've had a chance to learn where your water's coming from.
Yeah, you're curious about where the water's coming from for the property.
Correct. Yeah. Do you have wells, or is it coming from the county, or are you in the city? And obviously, water is a significant issue everywhere, but definitely in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, you're looking at sort of the nuts and bolts kind of questions, and water, where's that water coming from? And, that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, thank you. I'm heard.
Okay. I'll speak to Charles then.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to address Heather, what she was saying about safety, that I have found that the empathy circle is one of the safest sort of processes, gateway processes, because everyone gets heard, everyone gets sort of more or less equal time. And you can say anything you want, be free to say anything you want, express any emotions that you want, and you will be heard to your satisfaction. So just addressing Heather's issue of safety, I think this is a safe process.
So as far as Heather's question of safety, you just want to say that the empathy circle is a good way to address that, because everybody can say what they feel and feel heard.
Yeah, but in return, you got to listen to the other person, right? It's like
you
can say anything you want, but you got to be willing to listen to the other person. So I think that adds a level of safety.
But in return, it has to be mutual. Both sides have to agree to hear. It's not just one person speaking over the other.
And in terms of sort of workshops, this is already our first workshop in a sense. We're sort of training people in how to do empathic listening, which is foundational. So you're kind of taking part in a sort of a workshop as well, and learning sort of some core practices that we do for our empathy center.
And as far as workshops, this is kind of like the first workshop, in that you're being trained in how to participate in an empathy circle.
Yeah, in terms of the conditional use permit, it's been a little bit vague, but we've been digging through all the documentation. I think we've got it from the county. It was created through the county before the property was incorporated into the city, but we've sent the information request to the county to get the original documents. We've seen sort of copies of what I think is the conditional use permit, and we also had asked the planning commission to have a meeting with them to talk about and we're just waiting to hear from them. And so it's sort of in the process. We've got a whole bunch of documents, and so that's really core. It's like, what is the use permit? Kind of sets the stage for what we can do with the property.
So you have a whole bunch of documents concerning the conditional use permit, and you've been reading through them, and the conditional use permit sets the stage of what can be done.
Yeah, and we've been talking with the city, and also just sent a request for information from the county too, so that's in the works.
So you've been talking with the city and sent a request for information from the county.
In terms of water, there's they just put in a big pump. You know, they spent a lot of the previous renovations, so and I'm not sure where the water comes from, but probably Charles knows.
So as far as the water, there was some infrastructure put in by the previous owner, but you would think that I would know where the water comes from.
Yeah, and I appreciate Sean's nuts and bolts questions about that, because that conditional use permit is totally central to what we can even do there. So that is a core. That's kind of like the first question, really, almost to answer.
So you appreciate Sean's question, and because it's kind of the foundation of what we can do there.
Yeah, so I feel heard.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak? I can choose you next. Okay, well,
I'll take a quick turn.
Okay, then I'll speak to you, Kent.
Thank you.
So Kent, the water comes from the city of Santa Barbara. That's who I pay the bill to every month. You can reflect on that.
So Charles is responding to the question about water, and he knows that it comes from the city, and he's paying for it.
The previous owner did a lot of work bringing fire water up to the top, because that was a condition of doing the renovations that the previous owner did.
So Charles is aware of the fire realities in Santa Barbara, and he's looked into this, and the previous owners also did quite a bit of work about this subject of fire and water.
When the Catholics put in their requested, the use of the property, they asked for 7 to 8 sisters residents, and then a 30 to 40 faculty and 80 seminarians. So the total that was granted permission was, just under 126 people at that time.
So the question of numbers and come up, and how many people could be there and have been approved from there. And Charles feels that after research, the number 126 has come up and seems viable or acceptable, or at least in the books.
I know that in 2016, there was some thought of locating a private school there, but it was thought that with the 300 to 400 students, that it would be too many day trips up and down every day. So that was denied.
So he is aware that among the options considered in the past was the idea of a school, but a school of maybe 300 or more students. And Charles is aware that not only is that number excessive, but in listening to the neighbors, he knows that traffic is a real concern. So basically, that idea came and went.
There was a treatment center that wanted to use it, and I guess they started the renovations. I think they went bankrupt.
I believe you're referring to the last owners.
I'm not previous to the last owners.
I see. Yes. So as far as Charles is aware of, there's been several previous owners, and at least one of them went bankrupt in this attempt.
Yeah, the treatment center did get permission to do their substance abuse treatments there, but that kind of fell through, and it had opposition from the community. Then there was a thought of turning it into a homeless place that also had opposition, and I'm not quite sure why that fell through.
So more recently, there have been serious efforts to consider this property as a rehab situation for people. That was very poorly received by the immediate neighborhood, the political powers that be. And then after that idea passed, Charles points out that there was quite an effort to turn it into a homeless shelter, which again was really resisted by the community nearby.
Okay. Well, we have to pack up and get on the road. We'll listen to the rest on the road. I feel heard, Kent. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And Heather, can I speak to you?
Thank you. I would love it. I'm listening.
Well, thank you. I'll just, at my end, I have looked as carefully as I can at the CUP question, and all the data that I find says that this property is set aside for educational or spiritual use. And I am led to believe by sources that I very much trust that as long as this effort could fall under the category of either education or spiritual, there won't be any issues.
Right, and I'm hearing that you really studied this and the documents available to what the facility can be used for, and that there is agreement that it can be used for education and spiritual services or education or programming.
Yes. For the last 30, thank you, Heather. For the last 30 years, this property has been owned by absentee owners, people who did not know Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara did not know them. Santa Barbara was concerned. And I wish to commend, if there's the one thing that Charles and Edwin have done right, and there's more, but if there's one thing they have done right, it is they've reached out to the Santa Barbara community. And my own impression and information from a variety of sources is that in them reaching out the way they have and being open and honest, they will not encounter political resistance.
So what I'm hearing is that you'd like to commend both Edwin and Charles in being very active in the community, both listening to the community, reaching out to the community, and that's very positive, where some of the past owners have really been absent and not as embedded in the needs and connecting with community. And by being connected, it's going to make things a lot easier in the co-development with the local community.
Yes, exactly. And the final thing, Heather, from me would be that I am very impressed by the openness of Charles and Edwin. And in fact, Edwin has apparently posted online about 100 pages of email that he and I have shared. So there's not, as far as I can tell, and I sure have looked at it, there's nothing hidden going on here. And for those of you that are feeling new to this, I would urge you to at least read his one paragraph vision statement and his one paragraph mission statement. I'm under the impression he really means them.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you're very open and excited about the openness of Edwin and sharing. So nothing is hidden. Everything's available. Certainly this program is being recorded and online, and you really encourage people to read the vision, the mission, and the other material that's being made available.
Thank you, Heather. I feel very heard.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. So Juliet, would you like to be my listener? Thank you. Sure. So again, thank you all. I have been interested in this being about vision. And what I love is the amount of work being done around the vision and also specifically the mission, and particularly the criteria. and I'm enjoying learning more about what is legal, what's available, and the thought that's going into the criteria of what's being made available, the programming.
So I'm hearing you're very thankful, and you're reflecting on your gratitude around the vision, the mission, the criteria, and also you're curious about the legal aspects.
Yes, and related to that also, the thinking and the knowledge about, and I'll call it the competition, but the other of what has worked in that site, but also the other programming available in the community and around of how this vision could be different or consistent with other programs that have been done or that may be done in the future.
So I hear you're reflecting on other programs that have taken place up there and in the community, and what the future could hold about incorporating some of that.
Great, thank you. And I was also happy to hear about the fire water, and that the safety, and to get the comfort about the safety of the programming and the safety of ideas, and also about the safety within the facilities, that people are physically safe when they're there.
So you're reflecting on not only the safety of ideas and how that's being held, but you really are also reflecting on the physical safety and making sure that that's in place. And you were grateful to Sean for bringing up some of what she brought.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard.
You're welcome. Okay, so Edwin.
Listening?
Yes. I'm inspired by what everybody is sharing here and how deeply people are thinking about this, and impressed by how much work you've put into this already, Edwin.
So you're impressed by how much work I've already put into this and just by what everyone else is sharing?
Yes, and I was also concerned about, I know it's a fire area up there. Almost every time there's a fire, that area is under watch, if not threatened. And I know that with Pacifica at the Ladera campus, there have been evacuations and people are staying overnight. They can get trapped up there. These are practical considerations as well, even with water.
So the fire danger is a concern, because you heard that there's been fires up there, and even where you are in Pacifica, there's been evacuation. So the fire danger is a real concern.
Mm-hmm. And I look forward to seeing what emerges in terms of the community interest and ideas that get shared with you. People, I even reflect on international partnerships.
Yeah, you're just interested in how things develop with the community, as well as maybe making international connections and partnerships. So just looking forward to that development process.
And just thank you for including me in this conversation. I'm new to it, but I'm appreciating being included in the reflections.
Yeah, you're appreciating being included in this process and the empathic reflections.
So I feel heard. Thank you.
Then thank you. I'll speak to Sean.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. In terms of fire, there has been fire in that area. It went through the property, the building. Somebody said it's almost like a fortress, because it's, the cement tile floor ceilings, as well as brick walls. So it had gotten a little singed, but it went through the fires fairly well.
Yeah, I hear you saying that you're aware that the property has has had fires pass through it, and that because of the type of construction with brick and tile and so on, that it's weathered the fires pretty decently.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think they had goats there, which were kind of eating everything too. So we need more goats because things are starting to grow up. You know, after things get burned down, they're now with the rains. So that's definitely something to think about how to keep the brush down.
Yes, in terms of fire again, they've had goats up there. That's a great option in keeping the shrubbery and chaparral and so forth under control.
Yeah, and I was also thinking in terms of the empathy circle, usually we like to go for at least 3 rounds. Everybody's had at least 3 rounds to speak because, you know, the first time or two, you're feeling a little anxious, like, oh, what is this process? Am I doing it right? By about the 3rd round, you start settling into it and start getting more comfortable with it. So I just wanted to share that in terms of the circle process.
You're sharing more about the circle process in the sense that once everyone's had an opportunity to reflect and speak and share 3 times, then usually kind of kicks into gear that there's a familiarity with the process.
Yeah, so I'm also curious how anyone and people here might like to be involved in the center, because we're looking at with our Culture of Empathy Center, you know, we have a lot of volunteers who have volunteered. It's been pretty much a volunteer organization for doing trainings and so forth. So we're sort of, we have to shift all that to this physical space. And it's a whole process. It's to sort of scale up to this. And then also looking how, you know, anyone else might like to, any ideas for how you might like to be involved.
I understand you to say that you're looking for ideas, you're looking for volunteers, you want to scale up from ideas into having volunteers who might take some projects on and help, I guess, like you said, scale it up.
Yeah, because the overall vision is to make empathy a primary social value. Cultural social value, and that's to bring it into all sort of aspects of society. And I even ran for Congress here in the Bay Area with that under that campaign, like, let's build a culture of empathy. So it didn't win, but, you know, it kind of helped get the word out.
I'm hearing that you ran for Congress on a platform of building a culture of empathy. You didn't win, but you are passionate. This is your life calling, and you really believe and feel that the Las Canoas property can be an important foundational place, sure, property in the world to contribute to this important initiative of building empathy for everyone.
Very much so. Yeah, it seems like it's sort of scaling it up to be able to get more cultural attention for this mission. You know, Barack Obama, when he ran for office, he talked over and over again the country had an empathy deficit and he wanted to bring people together. And he said his main regret afterwards is he wasn't successful. And I think that we actually have practices and processes and are building a movement to do that. So I think we have a lot to contribute towards that mission.
Well, as I continue to try to reflect back what you said, I think you ought to create an advisory board and tap Obama on the shoulder to help head it up in terms of this can be his 3rd chapter of his, you know, desire to build a culture of empathy as well.
Yeah, exactly. If we can get him on board, it would fit right with what his message was.
Why not?
If we have anybody has contacts with him, he's welcome to be on the advisory board or be a board member. That's for sure.
What I'm hearing is you would love to have Obama involved. And if anybody has a contact or knows someone who could share this initiative with him, that would be great.
Yeah, so the question is, you know, I'm putting it out there that the mission is fostering more empathy in society, and it's to be thinking in those terms if you have ideas for doing that, because we're trying to bridge the political left-right divide. So, you know, we would love to have the Democrats and Republicans do empathy circles in Congress, right? That would be a core practice that the different sides. And if Trump runs again, we'd love to have Trump and Biden do empathy circles instead of a debate. So just, you know, thinking big here.
What I understand you saying is you're opening up this to everybody, and I don't need to continue to reflect back each time. Yes.
Yeah, just the essence. I feel heard. Yeah, I think you got it. So that's my time. So I feel heard.
Okay. Well, in addition, I'd like to open it up to everyone, and if it's okay, I guess.
We can do that. Now we've gone for about an hour, so now we can just open it up to general discussion without reflection. So yeah, so go ahead and just share anything that's on your mind, any questions, just feel free to jump in.
Well, if you don't mind me, I would like to jump in and thank Heather and thank Juliet for being here. I believe that both of them, they know what they're talking about. They have quite a bit of experience in the realm of and the spectrum of not just a property that holds retreats along the lines of empathy and spirituality and contributing to the well-being of the world. I'd love to have them share their thoughts and ideas about their experiences and so on.
Well, thank you, Sean, for that invitation. When you were speaking, Edwin, about people on different sides of political parties sharing together, you know, in empathy circles, I thought that Alport, you know, started that back in the 60s, Jordan Alport. And StoryCorps, that organization StoryCorps, they're trying to do that too. So it made me reflect on maybe there's a partnership there to even record some of these as examples of a way forward, a way that this can be, where people from different political parties might come together, but not share about their political views, but share about other things that connect them. And then once that connection is felt, it opens things up so that people then could share differences. And so I'm really inspired by, I've heard you mention that a few times, Edwin, and I love that. I really do. I think that that's a vision for the future that we need desperately.
So Charles and Vasilisa, we're just opening up for discussion. There's no reflection. So if you have any comments, and I think Heather, did you want to say? Sean had asked for your thoughts. You're muted.
Thank you. I love the idea of getting your message out there. And I think whether it's Obama or whoever, to really look at your media, and Shauna talked earlier about, you know, what media you'll have for guests who are coming, but there may be it podcasts or conversations, perhaps of you know, more publications from you. And I don't know, we haven't talked much about the whole marketing area, but certainly a lot of my background is in the production of media of different ideas, just to let people know that you exist, and that, you know, and that you get into the political arena of having a space for empathy. I think is phenomenal. That is non-political, and how one would manage that or get that message going. as you're saying, bigger than the place. So you have the place, but then you also have the world that you're really connecting to. And that to me is part of my background and exciting about having a place and also being in place to connect to other larger organizations in this world. So just, supporting that idea as you look, the 150 plus people coming there, how do you reach millions of people? Also, just another time is talking a lot about volunteers, and I know I'm in the sort of the Connecticut, New York area. There's a lot of legalities around how do you use volunteers, and just within your market to be mindful. You've been mindful about other things, about the HR considerations of how things are done and what are the criteria as you're moving from volunteers to employees, or how volunteers can be used in a not-for-profit or for-profit if you also end up having a for-profit division. So just the whole HR area would be something to consider. I'm sure you are, but you're sort of moving into that arena now, and there's a lot of legislation and legality around that. The other thing, just down the road a piece, I'd love to see something for empathy for animals. And we've been talking more about people, but there's much more going on now in care of animals and all kinds of animals, and certainly in the environment that you're in. We've talked about goats. I would imagine there's also, mountain lions, and certainly there's the birds, and it would be interesting to do some, how is the Empathy Center caring for and connecting to the animals in your neighborhood and around?
Yeah, and nature in general. So it's a very broad empathic vision. So empathy for PETA, or I don't know, the animal rights, they actually have an empathy center, I think in LA, that they actually call it the Empathy Center. So they're kind of advocating for empathy with animals. Yeah.
I like to think in images a lot, and I was wondering if if an image had been arising or that kind of served as a holding space for this, or might even be put forward as an image.
Yeah, we have the Empathy Center has a kind of a simple hand-drawn logo of a circle with people in the circle. It was somebody drew it from an empathy circle. So it was kind of basing it on that empathy circle as sort of the core practice. Because a lot of times empathy, you're talking about definitions, is defined as a individualist, one person listening to another or being empathic towards another. And that's, pretty core to the whole therapeutic, model, or as a therapist listening to the person. But what we're looking at is taking it to the next step where it's a mutuality of it. And I think that's something that's sort of missing, is thinking in relational mutual terms. And the empathy circle really captures that. It's not just one person doing all the listening, somebody doing all the talking, but it's that mutuality aspect.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And if I can jump in with a few thoughts, we start out talking about maybe Obama joining this, and there's other names I would put forth who are very interested in empathy. The Dalai Lama would be one. Lois Capps used to be the congresswoman. Many of you know that after her husband Walter died. And I think she'd be interested in this. Oprah lives in Santa Barbara, as does Ellen DeGeneres. I believe that Prince Harry would be drawn to this. Heather, I was really struck by your remarks about the story tour. And I myself believe there is a story here. I believe something is being born. I've said that before. I think something is unfolding. And I think there's a powerful story here. I've approached one of Edwin's friends named Lou, and another one who lives in the San Ynez Valley who's done this for years named Tom, about telling the story. So I'd love to see that. Animals have come up, and I'd like to mention that Cesar Millan is very interested in spreading his operation, which is not too far from this facility, and he's looking at Spain and near Boulder, Colorado, and but this idea of animals being involved. As an educator, I can tell you it's the next thing coming with children, and it needs to be. for me, some of this is exciting and new because I've been involved with so many organizations over half a century, and most of them are mostly interested in money. This one is not. This one has a good vision, and that is why I'm on the other side of where I normally am. And instead of pushing the vision, I'm pushing that it needs structure. It needs organization. It needs a little more discipline in that area. The last thing before I relinquish to Sean said something really very helpful at the beginning of this. I'm not sure you were all there. I was hoping to hear more about Pacifica and Casa de Maria. And she pointed out that this may not be the right format for a lot of discussion about synchronicities, overlaps, unfolding situations. I myself would welcome a conversation that's not necessarily to be broadcast, but just a sharing of some of these interesting overlaps between again, Casa de Maria, Pacifica, and now what Charles wishes to call Valinor. That is the new name for St. Mary's.
That could be a question right there. We're discussing the name even for the space. So we're setting up a nonprofit. The organization Center for Building a Culture of Empathy has just been an association. I've sort of avoided doing all the paperwork for a nonprofit, but now we have to scale up to a formal nonprofit, 501c3. And we want to call it currently the Empathy Center, just something a little simpler. Charles likes the word Valinor for the space, which is from The Hobbit, for the Lord of the Rings. That's where the elves go. I'm not like crazy about it, but I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about the naming. It's like, I'd love to hear kind of any thoughts about the naming of the space. Everybody is often referred to as, former St. Mary's, or, this is what it was called, St. Mary's Seminary. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in on that. Seems that Kent, you've warmed up to Valinor, but
yeah, I would just jump in from a marketing standpoint. It really helps. Like Miss Pacifica or Meridian or Essalon. It just helps. It's Valinor is just zippy. So it just, rather than the Center for Empathy, which is lovely, it's just a marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be, you can also have the tagline, Valinor, the Center for Empathy.
That's what we've kind of been doing. The Empathy Center, Valinor, the Empathy Center is kind of what we've been, the tagline we've been using. The problem is that Valinor is already taken with the domain name. So it can't be Valinor.com or org. It's got to be, but yeah. So it's like what I'm hearing there is, from a marketing point, just one word like Valinor, you think has a good marketing.
Yeah. Just for people to remember. And I also would like to just connect to what Kent just said, that there, and I know everything is open here. There are other organizations that are doing similar things, like where the Dalai Lama visits in other locations and that we might be able to share more about. Again, nothing confidential, but perhaps in a little more detail, or different models of organizational structures or people to consider talking to. So.
Yeah, I guess I want to say before we got started was, because Kent was curious about some information about La Casa de Maria and so on. I just felt that I didn't want to, out of respect, and also because, I don't know, it's been whatever now, for 5 years-ish since La Casa had to close, that I am not necessarily on the inside of what's going on there, and it would, out of respect, I just don't feel like it's a place to have a completely, public conversation about everything. And so I didn't really feel comfortable.
Yeah, in terms of other organizations, we'd love to talk with any organization, just about any sort of collaboration. The first thing we did is I know David Price, who's the son of Dick Price, founder of Esalen, and he'd been director there for 10 years or so. So we just kind of connected with him, got his ideas about the center. I just talked with someone from Mount Madonna, which is another retreat center up here near Santa Cruz. And, they had ideas, for cross promotion of if a workshop leader does a workshop at Mount Madonna, 1 week they connect with the San Francisco, the Bay Area community. And then if we hold they can come down to Valinar and then hold a workshop the following week and then have the LA, community, so they can sort of cross promote. So there's that was like one idea that they had for cross promotion, that it's easier for together we promote an event, and then also for the workshop leader, they have 2 places to do a workshop sort of back to back, which maybe is less travel for them. So those were some collaboration ideas.
Edwin is, sorry.
Please.
I was just going to say Edwin is forming or considering forming an advisory committee, and I just speak my own piece, not for him, but I sure would think that any of the 3 of you would be very valuable. And about these other places, I quite agree and appreciate Sean's thoughts. But in terms of other advisors, perhaps Juliet, I don't know how far back you go with Pacifica, and I don't know how far back Sean goes, but Don George basically was such a wonderful leader of Casa Maria for so many years. His wife, Dawn, as you might know, Juliet, taught at Pacifica. I don't know if she's still there. I doubt it. And they both were highly instrumental when I started the school down under in New Zealand. Another person or 2 that would be interested in this, I'm sure, are Steve Eisenstadt and his wife, Maren, who also, like Don George at the Casa, were major funders of the school down under that I started in New Zealand and sent their children to the other school in Santa Barbara. And you probably know that Steve is withdrawn from Pacifica in many ways, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was also quite interested in this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he probably would be. Yes. And I know with his dream tending, he does that internationally, and he's been interested in something with the Ukraine as well. And there's a new director of the retreat center at Pacifica. They have a lot of online offerings, but they also have in-person. But Laura Lee Scott is the new director of the retreat center at Pacifica, and she seems very open-minded and interested in all kinds of different collaborations and conversations. And so she might be a nice person to invite or include in any of these conversations. The last president, Joe Cambray of Pacifica, who's retired now, he still lives locally, and he may have some ideas. He wrote a book, Synchronicity, looking at quantum and complex adaptive systems. And there's a new president at Pacifica now, too, who is very interested in expanding the vision and the outreach of Pacifica and any collaborations. So, and particularly maybe even with nonprofits, so that there would be some bridge. So, I can maybe make those connections at some point.
That'd be great. Yeah, we're looking for any sort of connections, any ideas. As the center, we have the vision, and there can be different projects like empathy in the schools, because we have a group that's working on bringing empathy into the schools as a foundational practice. Empathy in politics, bridging political, social divides, or even in families. So creating different projects that could have, like paid, lead to it with maybe a group of volunteers around that, and then see about if people wanting to donate, they can donate to specific projects. For example, would be sort of one model that we're looking at, so, and we're looking for different, viable models for that.
And certainly Pacifica is closer, but I'm not sure if you're talking to the folks up at Meridian, up in Petaluma, because they have a similar model and do similar courseware to Pacifica.
I'm not familiar, no.
As we were sharing earlier, sadly, the facility that they used to use was burned down in the center of one of the fires. So fortunately, nobody was injured at that time. But they are similar in nature and do a full doctorate in psychology and other things. And that's where my doctorate's from. So that'd be fun to connect you with some of the work they're doing as well. It's very much aligned.
And what I've learned too is that particularly smaller retreat centers and nonprofit retreat centers, and smaller, I'm going to say, is 100 or even 150-ish heads in the beds. It's very difficult if you don't form some kind of marketing affiliation with others, that there's just not a budget. There's not much of a quote advertising marketing budget unless you affiliate or have a little consortium of other quote small retreat centers where you're exactly what you said earlier, you can kind of cross market. And so if you come to Valinor, and maybe there's a little brochure of the ones you're in affiliation with, for example, or you're having a retreat with, ABC Teacher, and there's a flyer, it's all on the website, of course, at the same time. There's a flyer to pass around that, this teacher is teaching at this other retreat center and so on, and maybe is on a tour of sorts. You want to be selective, of course, that they're of a caliber that is similar to what your property is, but it's really, it's important. And that kind of cross marketing is important because one retreat center doesn't have the budget that 10, just throwing out a number, or 20, or even 50 around the world can throw in together in terms of, like a monthly retainer that goes to this affiliated group.
So I'm hearing a lot about the marketing, really how to promote the different programs and kind of working together with other organizations to do that.
There's an organization called, I think it's called Holistic Center for Retreats or something of that nature. And there, I want to say not Breckenridge or something, not Breckenridge. They're out of Oregon, and there's a fellow there who has a small consortium, and they meet once a month from time to time. And here are these directors and so forth from these different smaller, maybe like a Hollyhock and so on, from around the country and Canada. And it would be important to eventually, get into those groups.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Sean, because I've in the past year or two, having had a facility and been very engaged with other facilities like Kripalu and Omega and Menla and some other ones, again, I'm more East Coast based. But other ones beyond that, the people getting together, particularly since COVID, and how much is done online, how much is done in person. there's been a big shift in this space and how these spaces are used, how they're marketed to, who's coming, who's not coming, the travel involved. So the business has changed because of the environment. And there's a lot more conversation. So I love that idea of talking to others, especially based on what's been going on in the market for the past couple of months. And it's exciting and also problematic, just because in many cases it relies on people coming to your location, and for a number of reasons people haven't been coming. So that the both and has been becoming more of a phenomena, and I think that's going to be here to stay as well.
Yeah, no question. I was working at Mandali in Italy, and when lockdown occurred, that was that. And we had to close for a certain amount of time. And that wasn't the only retreat center in the world that had to, quote, shut down, which put a lot of them, into like looking at bankruptcy, and I won't name names. So it was very, very challenging, and they had to look at a different, let's call it a business model. And no question, what does it look like? We got to go online now. We don't know anything about that, and we have to learn to put our programming online. But now what I'm learning in terms of trends to a certain degree too is that, people they like the option because I can pay a little bit less and have a retreat at home, but and watch the webinar, seminar, and participate from that perspective, but they really want in person. At the same time, what we're learning is, some of the demographic has moved to, and I am going to say 1440 in this particular case, has become somewhat corporate-ish, corporate leadership, corporate da-da-da. It's very residential. People come for, I'm going to say, not business necessarily, but certainly they kind of found a niche in a way, instead of going there, maybe yoga, but yoga's offered. They're also finding that a spa, quote, wellness, the wellness industry is just huge. And so the more you can incorporate a wellness element with not, you don't have to go too spa-esque, but the more of a wellness element to the property is also a big draw, stress and so on. So I'm just throwing all, trends out there. But the cool thing about Santa Barbara is Santa Barbara really has a need. We went over this one time in another, really has a need. They're incredibly awesomely, wonderfully feng shui, the whole thing located, as is the property. And who doesn't want to go to Santa Barbara? It's internationally known, and it's easy to get to a certain degree. So I think it has all the makings, like Kent was saying, about super opportunity. And then one other quick thing, like I said earlier, is that I really, lots of contacts of organizations and people, and like a Meridian or a Ubiquity or whatever, that would love to have a little brick and mortar home base that they could utilize from time to time. And, maybe there's a retainer element about something like that. Anyway, I can get a little all over the map there.
No, that's great. That's because, when we're coming into this, we have no idea about the current state of the retreat center. Like any field, it's constantly changing. So you have to get a sense of what's happening in the industry at the moment. What are the trends? At Mount Madonna, they were saying people don't want shared rooms anymore. They want their own room, for example. They're finding that, is a real issue. And you mentioned 1440. I saw that too, that before they had done a lot of different variety of workshops, and now it's as if it's just a corporate retreat. Bring your corporation, rent the space for your corporation. I think they're doing no overnight or residential workshops there anymore. So that's like a big shift. So it's like, what's the trends? That's what we're trying to get a picture of, is what those current trends are. within the context of the vision too, with that we have.
It's really important too, I feel. You want to have your bread and butter groups, I call them, and they book every year. So doing, your annual budget, you've got, 20, I'm just throwing out a number, or 30 or 50, ABC organizations who they book every year, they're coming back, and you just park that into your ROI. You need those bread and butter, I call them, groups, and then you fill in. It's like putting a puzzle together. Then you can fill in with the ones who call you 6, 7, 8 months. Oh, I want to bring my yoga group, or I would like to bring and then you can park them into these other places. I mean, it can be kind of a work of art to put that whole thing together. That makes sense.
You've done that, Sean.
I guess that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Heather, please.
Another model, if you have not, at least to take a look at it, and I know you've been studying many things, is the Casey Center in Virginia Beach. So that would be another one. Just they've really grown over the past couple of years, and they have a very diversified model in terms of they teach, they have groups come, they have it in person, they have it online, they do certifications, they've got the bookstore, they've got the spa. So you may not want to go that diversified, but it's fairly small. The same thing Menla has really diversified. So if you're familiar with it, the Dalai Lama's retreat or center out here. So just some interesting models, again, from the East Coast, because it's in case you aren't as involved with them as you are in the West Coast programs.
I'd like to, I have a real concern here. It comes from me. But I feel that Edwin has a remarkable vision and a remarkable passion. I feel that his strength. I feel like he means it when he says he wants to reach the world. Now, my worry is that, and I think even he might disagree, but I'm sharing my perspective. Publicity is really needed. The CUP is really needed. Water is really needed. Marketing, business, the business model. Should there be a spa? Should there be wellness? What about corporate retreats? I think everything I just named is important, and I don't think Edwin should be involved with them. I think that his strength is this larger core vision. I think this project needs help in everything I just named. My own hope, though, is that Edwin doesn't get, as I've seen and experienced myself, to be honest, you can get lost in these other details to the point you lose track of what is the central vision. So I'm all for business models. I've been pushing that very idea. But I'm hoping that people, including the people listening to my voice right now, can jump in around the edges here, because they need to be addressed, but not, in my view, by him.
Those are such good points. Is there a budget already for a couple of employees, like a marketing director, for instance?
Sorry, go ahead, Edwin.
Oh, we're at the stage, we're just sort of developing this sort of step by step. We're looking at sort of the property. I'm working on the nonprofit right now to kind of set that up. So you have to go, that's going to start setting this, the stage for that. The model is that the Charles's LLC owns the property. We're setting up this nonprofit to manage the property. So, with that, we're going to need the board, the kind of setting up the structure, the strategic plan and all that. So that's sort of in the works. And Charles is saying, he's willing to put in several $1 million into the development of the property. He's going to need that for renovations and so forth. So I don't think we're at the stage for like marketing yet, because we don't have a clear the framework for kind of the marketing. It's more sort of the development of the property, getting the foundations together, the basic foundations. It's more kind of like the 501c3, the strategy, and getting all that. And we started a advisory group that we meet, every week or so. So you're welcome to join that too, or it's to kind of have these different topics come up and, start organizing them and get it more of a systematic plan together. But it's sort of all in the works. We're just kind of getting started. We're starting with these empathy circles as a way to connect with the community. It's been great for, connecting with everyone here. It's sort of a connection space. You can bring any friends, anyone that has ideas, come to these circles and share them and see what connections there are, understand, ask any question. And, so we're sort of at that phase. I will mention that the spa, we are going to put in a pool, sauna, so it'll have more of that aspect as well. Hot tub, kind of looking out over the view there. So I don't know if that answered your question, or I don't want to be too vague, but we are sort of in that stage of trying to put the puzzle together. And
And someone asked about budgets. We've looked at 5 so far, but they're all just to get minds going. They're nothing, but they range from what you might almost call shoot the moon, millions of dollars, to something quite small, essentially a community of adults practicing, witnessing empathy. So there have been some initial efforts in that area, but miles to go.
Yeah, there's a community of practice, which is, if you look at places like here in the Bay Area, we have Spirit Rock, Buddhist Center. You've got what is it?
Green Gulch.
Green Gulch, that's what I was thinking of. So you have a community of practice, of Buddhism practice, right? So it has a religious aspect. There's a core group who's living there, who are teachers as well as students who are kind of learning that practice. And then they open it up to workshops. So they'll have all kinds of workshops are held there. So it could be looking at a similar model. The community of practice is founded on mutual empathy, and empathy is the mutuality, there's openness that comes from that, trust, connection, innovation, design. If you're familiar with human-centered design, coming out of the D School at Stanford, or IDEO, it's a whole process for, if you design anything, the first step is you need to empathize with the people you're designing for. So there's the design and innovation component. There's the mental health, well-being aspect, which is the core. Empathy is sort of the core of that, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, Juliet, at your school, right? You're teaching all these counselors and therapists. And then there's also empathy is the core of mediation. If you do any sort of mediation, it's like, the first thing is get the parties to mediate, to listen to each other. And again, so those are some sort of general areas of a core of people working on that within any kind of workshops, coming in. So that's kind of one model. If we could find people who are kind of, interested in that sort of thing. I'm planning on, moving down. So, yeah, so already got a room there, so I'm don't have any curtains, needing curtains, so it's yeah, so it's got my room's got my name on it.
When you bring up Green Gulch, I think of a couple things from there. One is the food, of course, in Tassajara, the food and the bread. So at some point we haven't talked about the food,
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
The many centers have, signature food. So there was just, and I don't know, I guess I'm hungry, but yeah, what I'm talking about there. And, then the idea, and other centers have, and people there, if you want to, you can participate in the gardening and the making of the food. And so the food is part of the ceremony of being there. So just, I'm sure in all your planning, I'll just throw in the food thing.
Yay. I love it.
Gotta throw in the bread, throw in the bread and doing the dishes, both, all collected. But certainly, other organizations, that becomes a profit center in many ways. And then something to look at as you're doing the not-for-profit, are you also simultaneously looking at a for-profit? So not necessarily that bookstores are ever profitable, but sometimes they are, they have and you may not have the space for it, but are other things that would be, some are not for profit, because some of this corporate stuff is for profit. So there's different types of events. So I know you're talking mostly not for profit. Anyway, let's have a rambly sentence, but
yeah, we're looking at the nonprofit, I think, or running the pretty much everything, all the the whole center. It would be owned by the LLC. I mean, that's the current model that we're looking at. So it would just pay rent or a lease to that. So I think everything would kind of be managed by the nonprofit. I mean, we're talking all kinds of tax issues. What falls outside of the scope of the mission? How is that taxed? And then I'm looking at all that. It's a nightmare. So, but it's complicated. And, Kent keeps saying, don't get, stuck in the weeds. But I think for the foundation, it's important to really sort of master to have an understanding of all the basic nuts and bolts aspect to set it up on a good footing. So I'm not worried about that. So, but yeah, so I don't know, in terms of corporate retreats, isn't it that, a corporation can just come do a workshop and it's, it fits within the mission that we're trying to foster empathy and education for any corporation that wants to hold a workshop there.
And as you're looking into, I don't want to get into the whole, what the tax thing is and what's appropriate there and what people are coming in and what they're doing. So it's very specific to your organization. That was all. Just there's different ways in not-for-profit of what can be done, or sometimes spas are more for-profit than not-for-profit. So it's just the structuring.
Yeah, well, that's we're trying to work that out. So those are all good things to bring up and really to address. Yeah.
I think what Pacifica did when they had a couple of massage therapists that would be available on site when there are retreats happening. I believe they were just independent contractors who came in, so they didn't have to worry about paying them through Pacifica. That's another way to think about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of handling all those situations, little nuts and bolts of those details. Yeah.
Just a quick question to the three ladies who have had more experience with these retreat centers than I have. Many of them are quite upscale. They're spas and massage and hot tubs overlooking the Pacific, and pricey actually. Now, this facility that we're talking about today is going to be redone. It has to be improvements, new building. My question is about the rooms. What's your, shall we say, advice to the question? Should this be sort of a simple, almost like monastic environment, comfortable but not posh? Or do you think that the realities today, this thing has to be more upscale?
I'll take
that. In between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The in between. It is the in between. Leaning on posh. And it can be rugged posh. So posh means it's the pillow is nice. The blanket is nice. That it's clean. It doesn't have to be you know, a 5-star hotel, but it has to lean on feeling good. Some of the in the past, the traditional dormitory worked, and I think if you're really having, you know, a school or something, and just okay, it really is a dorm, it goes a dorm. But if you're even if you're coming and it's not that expensive, to have a couple of the little the niceties, you know. I think if I could be wrong, but I think even at Greenbelt, you know, you have there's a little tea in the room, or there's a little teapot in the room, or just a little bit of special care, whatever that means. Nuanced care. It doesn't have to be much, but it has to be careful or full of care. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Very much so. Yeah.
And clean.
Yeah, I think also, well, Heather's right, because again, you know, you're looking at your, you know, your ROI. I mean, you know, it'd be great to have programs that, let's say, might be pricey, but on the other hand, you might be able to configure, let's say, part of your dorm or something like that, that can then take on a group that is more needful, let's put it that way. But if you haven't had a chance to look, you know, when I was working at Mandali in Italy, and you can look at their rooms, and they are sparse, if you will, but they are beautiful. And the types of materials, the bedding, just very simple. They have that kind of yes, it was in Italy, but a little bit of I want to say sort of a Nordic design, but it might have a Bali overlay on top of it. Simple, but like Heather was saying, really lovely. And those small amenities that you know, like a tray with a pot on it and a couple of tea bags, so that in the morning, you know, you could fix yourself a nice cup of tea, or in the afternoon, whatever. She's right. You can do it very simply, but with a really, you could say, even kind of an elegant upscale kind of a simple tone to it. And be thoughtful. You know, I wrote some books on sacred space and feng shui, so I'm very have attunement to what I consider to be a property that's got let's call it an overabundance of masculine energy, which this one does. And then La Casa, for example, which had an overabundance of the feminine energy. You drove up this canopy, you know, oak tree kind of lane to get into this property that had lots of oaks, and it was very, I hope it's okay to say, sort of womb-like in there. So the ambiance had this natural vessel of safety and feeling and nurture, which is a lot of those, you know, quote, feminine energies. And some of the things that you can do with your rooms is you can incorporate those, quote, feminine, nurturing, soft fabrics, curves, round. I mean, there's all these kinds of other things that we can talk about another time that bring that energetic attribute and ambience to it. Overly masculine, hard, straight lines up in the sunshine, instead of being, you know, all canopied with trees. So I'm just kind of going back and forth about that. And you want to encourage that, I call it a vessel, that ambiance of nurture, vessel, safety, comfort, relaxing. Yeah, I'm trying to say it back.
Yeah, very much. It's very institutional right now. It was an institution. It was for male priests. So there's a lot to really transform it into being more, I don't know, yeah, more aesthetically pleasing, and all the qualities you just mentioned. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Juliet should be able to comment on that, because, and can't refer to it at a certain point. You know, they have Ladera, and I'll stop and you can fill in, but Pacific has two campuses. One is down near closer to the ocean, and it's got the one level, beautiful stucco tile roof buildings, very garden-like and intimate in a sense. And then you drive up Ladera to what Seminary as well. It was St. Thomas Seminary, and it's a big, brick building with not dissimilar from St. Mary's. It was a seminary for guys being priests. They've done beautiful things with the garden, and I'll stop now because Juliet, is far more familiar with that, but they needed to work on that as well. It was a similar situation.
Yeah, there's a labyrinth and little statues around, and a yurt now, a rose garden, things like that. Nice colors. Yeah, I haven't seen any of the dorm rooms. I think they're pretty basic, but then they have a couple of high-end rooms apparently in the main building for visiting guests and things like that. I haven't seen them, but they're supposed to be really nice.
I have seen them, and they're absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been upstairs in the boardroom.
Yes, I've been up there. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's really nice. With a fireplace and everything, just incredible.
Yeah.
But of course, the problem, it seems like when you do that, as they did to Ladero, then you have to charge to cover your expenses. So
yeah,
there's that very difficult balancing act there.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Maybe one room that's like a VIP kind of, a special guest,
Well, I think
they've always got students in the dorms, so they can't use them so much for the retreat center. They have to really structure and plan that well, because there's a swarm of the master's students constantly coming through there. But I don't know, I would listen to Sean. Any space that I've been in since I met you, Sean, in 1996 is magic. Sean knows how to make a space magic. It's just amazing. So you'd be a good consultant from the feng shui point of view, and also just aesthetically, you have that. So.
Well, that's definitely something we're needing to look at, is the overall aesthetics of the space, how to transform it. So that's great. Yeah.
Sean,
I mentioned we do have that advisory group meeting. I don't want to take too much of your time and so forth, but you're welcome to join us in that too, any of you. So
well, when are your advisory?
We were doing it. It's not every week, but it's like before this session, for about 50 minutes, we were meeting with Kent and Lou and sometimes Charles, just to kind of like start thinking. We're also looking to put together teams eventually, for the staffing, and we're not quite there yet, but it's a way to just kind of discuss and sort of make connections and see where, to get this first layer down, and then start seeing what the next steps are. So just mention that.
Thank you.
Sean, is Sean's home in Santa Barbara, may I ask? Sean, is that your residence? Are you local?
Not at the moment. I've been recovering from some surgery up in the Pacific Northwest, but my homes and all the stuff that I put into storage is in Santa Barbara before I went to Italy. I'm looking forward to going back.
Okay.
Sooner than later, and candidly, I would love for, this might be one of those vehicles to take me back, but it's only a matter of months, I suppose.
Thank you.
Great. So I don't want to keep us on time. We said 2 hours. I want to keep us over. So any final thoughts? And I'll send an email afterwards too with all this info. But Kent, do you want to just any closing thoughts before we go?
Only that I think this is just what the doctor ordered, so to speak. I think these three women have their heads screwed on and have a lot of good experience. And I'm grateful that they're willing to participate.
So kind, thank you.
Yeah, Juliet, do you want to?
Well, I thought that starting it with the empathy circle and grounding a meeting like this in that way is just really moving to me and inspiring. I feel like I know each of you a little bit better just in terms of the essence of who you are. And I really commend you for having this vision and walking the talk.
Thanks, Juliet. Heather?
Thank you. Thank you to Sean for inviting me. I would agree. I love the way it started out in this whole center and what you're doing. I would add one more thing to the room conversation is remember the ADA and compliance. And it's just when you're doing all this, I can't overstate how important that is, especially these days. And more than you might imagine, and because things were often built before wheelchairs got larger and other things. So I'm sure you're taking that into consideration, but please do. And hopefully we'll see you again. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sean?
Well, I want to say thank you to Juliet and Heather for coming today. I'm grateful, blessed for your friendship. And I agree, they're incredibly bright women and have one foot in the real world of running retreat centers, if you will, and properties, and another foot in the spiritual, loving, empathic world. And I think that that's something of a rare commodity these days. And I also want to acknowledge you, Edwin, for the transparency. I mentioned this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. That's rare these days too. And so to walk your talk and be transparent about this process is really extraordinary and wonderful. And if you don't mind following up with me anyway, and of course I would love it if Juliet and Heather wanted to pop in too with your advisory, the dates and times and so on, I'd be happy to participate.
Great. Yeah, so I'll end with Sean, thank you for joining us in a couple of these circles, and especially for inviting your friends. It's a bit of a Ponzi scheme. You invite more people. It's like invite your friends, to come. We'd love to talk to them and meet them and just hear their ideas and answer any questions they may have. So thank you both, Juliet and Heather, for joining us in this. And Kent, thank you again for joining us and having been on the advisory group that we're starting to form. And it's to be continued. You can join as many of these discussions as you wish. I think next week we have one again. I think, Sean, you'd signed up for, I'm not sure. And then Christian, so he works at the center right now. So we have still space for others. So that's it. So thank you very much. We do a little jazz hands. So for our photograph, goodbye. And thank you so much. Goodbye. Yeah, that's the spirit.
Oh, have a
good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Beautiful.